What I hope to do today is share a concept around a relationship model that's going to do a few things. Number one, it's going to help you understand that you probably ended up with the wrong partner and in the wrong marriage. It's the speech you could give to your kids at the wedding, where you could give them that speech and tell them what to do. But if we understand this model, what it's going to help us maybe do is manage that relationship a little more effectively. So again, the models that we teach is really based on psychology. I mean, that's where we lean into. We lean into the world of psychology because it answers a few questions. Who am I? Why do I behave the way I do? Why is my significant other a lunatic? Why is my partner difficult to deal with? And if I could start to ask some of these questions, I might start to get to some answers. So to begin, this is an opportunity for us to interact. How many of you are in a long-term relationship where you accuse your significant other of not listening? Or maybe they accuse you of not listening. Well, there's a reason for this, and this comes from a model. And when it comes down to listening, we don't listen. In fact, the stats are out there. We only retain about 20% from what we hear. But why? Why do we only retain 20% from what we hear? Well, there's something called the listening quadrants. And what the listening quadrants say is that we all listen in very specific ways, and it helps you identify your personality and helps you understand why you process the information the way you do. But you could only listen through 4 sets of ears. How many of you, when you're listening to someone talk about their concerns, and as the person is beginning to talk to you, the first thing in your head is you're thinking, okay, here we go again. Here's this person whining. Here's this person going on with all their concerns and their problems and their issues and their this and their that, and you start criticizing them. In fact, this once happened to me many years ago. My wife came home and she said, babe, there's something wrong with the car. And the first thing out of my mouth was, what did you do? What'd you do? What'd you do? And she said, no, I did not do anything. I said, no. There's nothing, the cars don't just make funny noises. So fast forward this, I'm a little mechanical. I like to think I'm a little techie. I go outside, I look at the car, I discover the problem. And there's the exhaust missing. It's a Q5. It's a Q5. It's a brand new fucking car. What the hell? Right? Now I've seen her drive. I've been in a car with her. I've been married to her for quite some time. I know what she does. She gets a little aggressive on the road, lays on the horn. She once called me and said, babe, there's people chasing me in the car. And the first thing I said was, what'd you do? And this is when I discovered that when I listen very specifically to my wife, I'm listening to her through what we call the ears of criticism and judgment. Anything that comes out of this individual's mouth, I'm going to shoot down with some sort of critical, judgmental, accusatory statement. And the danger in doing this is you're not actually giving the individual an opportunity to speak and to share and to connect. The worst part about this, if we're negotiating, we're talking about partnerships and more business and our marriage, we're actually cutting ourselves off from a lot of information. How many of you do that? Where someone's listening or you're listening and they're talking and the first thing you're thinking is, what's the problem? Look, I don't want to share this, but I'm a coach and sometimes clients are going, my life is tough and my work is difficult and my marriage is difficult. And I'm thinking, fuck, here we go again, another, right? But then I got to remind myself, I go, no, focus, practice, do the work, turn the ears of listening. Now, the interesting thing is if we do this in our business lives, if we do this in our personal lives, we're probably also doing this with our kids. How many times have your kids come in and they start to tell you a concern, an issue, a problem with this, a thought, and you're thinking, Now, here's what we know psychologically. When we do this, what you're literally doing is you're taking that emotion, that concern, that communication, that issue, and you're literally making that person swallow it. And it's a problem. And not only does this become a problem, it starts to create a pattern. So when you're future interacting with them, what does the person do? As they're coming up, they're going, anything I express and share and talk and get out there is going to be shut down instantly. But not all of you are such critical human beings. You got kids, right? And how many of them are in sports? The kid comes home, right? It's like, oh, Dad, man, it was so tough. The other team was so difficult. They skated harder. They're real Canadians. They were born with skates, all right? They were like ducking and diving and weaving and this, and we lost. And as this kid is sharing his despair and his challenge and his concern and his defeat, Dad says, don't worry, son, it's just a fucking game. Wait until life gets a hold of you, right? But how many of us do this with actual kids? It could be a 10-year-old kid. Hey, I'm having a little tough time, or I lost my soccer game or my hockey game. And the first thing we do is we wash it away. We say, don't worry, it's just a game. Now, this is called minimizing, and the danger in minimizing when people are talking to us is we're not minimizing the situation and removing the feeling, we're actually minimizing their world. And we do this incredibly, or we do this a hell of a lot with children. And in our effort to save them, to protect them, to nurture them, to make them feel better, we wash this problem away. And I used to do this with my head of sales, and that's probably why they didn't sell, and I had to get rid of them recently. But they would come in, I swear, and they'd be like, I'm having such a tough time getting the presentation. I said, don't worry about it. All you got to do is book the meeting. And then they went, oh, I haven't had time to practice. Oh, don't worry about it. Oh, I missed my target. Don't worry about it. Anyway, in February, they were very surprised in why they got fired. I wasn't, because I was saying don't worry about it the entire time. So one of the things that we got to understand, what really messes us up in relationships is this whole communication factor. This is where we feel misunderstood. How many times have you walked away from a negotiation, from a conversation, from a interaction where you felt misunderstood? Now, how many times have you said, you know what, I want to go back and I want to have this conversation? The failure with us as human beings is we're not actually giving ourselves enough space to receive information. We hear the words presence and consciousness and, connection. It's all BS. It's just words that we're throwing out. What's so cool about psychology, what's so cool about these practices, these concepts, is it's something that I can action in the moment. I can sit there and go, oh my gosh, as this person's speaking to me, I'm just smashing down everything they're saying. And I'm doing it internally. So there's a third quadrant, which is the problem solver, and we call these the advice monsters, right? Some of us feel really good giving it the advice, and as coaches, we've got to be really careful of this. Because people come and they talk to us about their concerns, their problems, their issues, their challenges all day. And our sales teams do this, our service teams do this, our operational teams do this, our vendors do this, our partners do this, our significant others do this. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to fast forward in these situations. And what happens is as they're beginning to tell us the issue, the first thing we're doing is we're problem solving it. Here's what you got to do. I did this with my best friend. We're no longer best friends, by the way. He said, I'm getting a divorce. I said, no problem. Here's what we got to do, right? And moved into like ultimate problem solving mode. And it actually disrupted the relationship tremendously. And the truth to it, and you know this when you're dealing with a problem, when you're stressed out, when you're going and you're venting and you're talking, what's the last thing you're asking for? Advice, right? But we as egomaniacs will call ourselves entrepreneurs, right? We love giving advice. It feels good to fix a situation. The worst thing is you give someone advice and they go and they do it, you applaud yourself in the back, you go, I am freaking brilliant. We should start a business, we should start coaching, we should start doing all of these things. So when we listen, one of the quadrants we listen to is out of criticism and judgment, the other one we listen to is out of minimizing, and the third we listen to is out of problem solving. And guys, it's problem solving. Ladies, it's the advice monster. We all do this. There's a final quadrant, and I'm leading up to the next model, which says sometimes when people speak to us and they're talking to us about their concerns, their issues, their feelings, their ideas, their opinions, we might not criticize, we might not minimize, and we might not problem solve. But what we love to do is interrupt. Because as individuals, we love to take over the me too. Oh, I'm having such a tough day at the office. Oh, me too. I got a lot of pressure on me. Hey, this just happened to me today. Oh, I got to tell you what just happened to me today. Anyone have that friend where you want to kill them? You're going and you're sharing and you're talking and you want to strangle them at the end of the 14 minutes? Because they're me tooing you, right? And at no point in any of these interactions you go, you know what? You are an amazing human being. One of the most fundamental things we can start to practice is our social skills, and that begins with listening. And this is the problem with training. As we go and we do this active listening course that says what you want to do is you want to actively listen, stare at them in the eyes, pay attention, right? Repeat, paraphrase, and come up with questions. It's not listening, you're not present. And presence is one of the most important things we can operate with, specifically in relationships. What probably happens to a lot of us is we're carrying such pressure and stress, and we're so busy and we're so focused and we got so much of this that I'm just navigating my own weights. So when someone else brings their weights, I'm like, I don't have time for that because I'm still carrying mine. And the truth to it, this is the concept of debriefing, right? This is why we all go to the confession booth, right? Walk into the confession booth, we say, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. He says, what happened? Well, I searched some real nasty stuff in Google this week. I had some inappropriate thoughts and blah, 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 blah. And Father says, don't worry, you are forgiven. You're like, okay, well, and you leave. Anyway, next week I come back again. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Oh, well, what happened this week? Oh, well, I did it all over again. The stuff I told you last week, did it all over again. I'm a glutton for punishment, but I figured I'd come and talk to you about it. Okay, and we talk and we talk and we talk. And the priest says, don't worry, you are forgiven. You think, fuck, this is brilliant, all right? Anyway, this goes on for another couple of weeks. Comes back, Father says, wow, you're here quite often. Say, yeah, this is like amazing therapy. By the way, I'm Jewish, I'm not even Catholic, right? But this shit really works, coming and being able to talk. The biggest challenge we have as human beings is something called internalized stress, unexpressed emotion. Where do we go as leaders and as entrepreneurs and as business owners? We're navigating and fielding everyone's challenges and stress all day. So when it comes down to debriefing, this is what we're trying to do. You see, the exercise in doing this isn't being empathetic, right? It's being really talented at recognizing that the human being in the moment needs to, what we call emotionally vomit, express, talk, get it out, but they need to do it uninterrupted. And the biggest failure that we operate within our relationships is we interrupt people. There's a very simple rule, it's called the shut up principle. That's it. Like, you have to literally catch yourself and be like, all right, this is not the time for me to fix, to problem solve. You're literally evaluating the situation in the moment and going, okay, this isn't in the casual conversation where we're poking at each other and doing that thing. This is an individual that's talking about a scenario, a situation, a decision, a problem, an exercise. And most of us, 99% of us, and you'll know this is true, will fix our own nonsense if we're given enough time to sit with it, to process it, to talk it out, to soundboard it. Because every time you're walking around and going to your network talking about your concerns, your issues, you're sharing your stuff, you're not looking for advice, you're not looking for that problem solving, you're not looking to be told what you're thinking is wrong and you shouldn't be so sensitive, you're looking to be heard. And in the world that we're living today with communication and with being so instant and so disconnected, we have to come back to practicing one of the most fundamental things, which is listening. And it doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be this weird, wonky, woo-ha, sort of grab your earlobes, focus and stare at them in the eyes. I could catch myself in the moment. Now, I'm a pretty strong critical personality. So every time you talk to me, the first thing I'm thinking is, all right, here we go again. I'm coming with those critical thoughts. I'm also a massive problem solver. And if I'm not careful, what I end up doing is problem solving and criticizing at the same time. And I do it a lot as a leader as well. So if we're truly going to be empathetic, we're going to sit there with the individual, understanding the emotion and the position, and words aren't going to make the difference. My presence and my availability to listen is. So that's number one. Number two, there's a very practical thing that you look for. When someone is talking, they will shut up and they will then ask you, hey, what do you think? Is this a big deal? Hey, am I making a big deal out of this hockey thing right now? Am I being a little too sensitive right now? And I swear, if you wait long enough, they will then ask you to show up with some critical position, to show up with telling them that's okay, to show up with some answers and some guidance. But we're so quick to give it without permission that people aren't able to receive it. And the biggest failure, the biggest waste of your time and energy is giving gold, advice, direction, exercise, and the individual isn't able to receive it. So literally, if you sit and you wait, and I do this all the time, I literally do this every single day in sessions with people where I'll be like, all right, just shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, and then I have to stop myself from saying that because I'm actually not listening. I'm just telling myself to shut up so much. Swear to you, right? And then I'm like, okay, wait, like let's process, and I'll paraphrase back in my own mind, and then someone will say, so do you have some suggestions on what direction we can take? Can you be a little more empathetic and like tell me that you give a shit and that you care? I care about you and I give a shit. Right? Perfect, right? Like you literally do these things. And by the way, this word empathy doesn't have to be this warm thing. It just has to be more presence and connection and availability. And if you don't do this with your significant others, and you're not doing it with your business partners, and you're not doing it with your teams, then at least do it with your kids. Because this is the next generation that if we're not careful, we're going to screw them up, and guess who they're going to turn into? Us. Okay, I got one more to share with you before we got to wrap up, but I started late, so I get to go a little bit extra. Okay, there is something called the IMO Theory. Anyone ever heard of this? It's relationship coaching, imago, a Latin word for image. And here's what the concept says. It says that relationships go through very distinct stages. We could think about personal relationships, and we could think about professional relationships, right? Our partnerships is like a good sort of professional marriage type of thing, right? Meeting our significant others, that's also sort of a good example of this. Friends, right? Meeting that really close friend that like you've got that sort of friendship with. And what it says when we were born this perfect circle, this bountiful round human being. You were given the best gifts of your parents, both parents. Whether you were raised by them is a different story, but when you were born a genetic, perfectly round human being. And as you were raised in your formative years, your parents split your personality. They break you in half. And you now fall towards one side of the parent personality or the other. And you now go off into this world as a half circle. We meet our significant others, swiping, and they haven't even met, but the universe has brought their phones together, and he goes, he says, this is it. Fast forward the conversation, you're walking on this date, and you're staring at each other, and it's a sense of timelessness, a sense of unification. He's not even going to say this, but he's like, this is my other half of the circle. This is the one I've been looking for, right? Anyway, he calls up his friends the next day. He says, I met the most amazing woman. She is incredible. You should see, when we went on this walk last night, we walked for freaking hours. I hate walking, but we walked and walked and walked and walked and walked. When I walked out of my shoes, I had blisters on my feet the next day. But as we walked, she she was telling me, and she was creative, and she was sensitive, and she went, oh, look at the air and the clouds, and the this, and she was imaginative, and this is fucking brilliant. I've never met such an exquisite human being in my life. And she called up her friends. She said, I've met the most amazing man. When he walked with purpose. I had to keep up with his stride, but he knew where he was going in life. But we go on the next date, and he says, this is the restaurant we're going to, and this is the food we're going to order. And he called his friends, and after the next date said it was whimsical. She floated around the restaurant. Took her 17 minutes to sit down. She was friendly with everyone, blah, 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 blah. And this is what is called romantic love. There's a sense of completion. And why is there a sense of completion? Because the concept says that when your personality was split as a child, you are now going out to seek your other half of the circle to heal the wounds of that childhood. And we're trying to resolve our childhood trauma, literally with our parents, in our new relationship. And this is where they say you end up dating your mother or your father. And you love them for that. You think it's absolutely freaking amazing. This is short-lived, this romantic love, unification, connections, like timelessness. And this lasts for about 10 to 14 months. And then Darren calls up his buddies and he says, I'm gonna fucking kill her, all right? I'm going to murder her. I go, what happened, Darren? Man, all right, try to go to a restaurant, all right? It's like, which restaurant do you want to go to? I don't know, all over, blah, 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 blah. And then she calls up her friend, she says, I'm gonna kill him. He always wants to go to the same restaurant. When he walks, I have to run after him. He's running with such stride and purpose, da, 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 da. So what we end up falling in love with through the romantic love moves us into the next stage, which is something called the power struggle. And 5 things happen in the power struggle. The first thing that happens in the power struggle is denial. So what happens in that is you deny your participation. You say, it's not me, it's her. Right? She's a lunatic. You should meet her family. Complete weirdos. They don't drink, they don't swear, they don't do anything. And you can't stay in denial forever, so now you move into the next stage, which is a little bit of shock. You think, what is going on? Where did this person go? What happened to all of this? But you can't stay there forever, so now you move into the next stage, which is the anger. And there's 2 types of anger. The anger, where I once bought a house and I moved in, and as I moved into the house, neighbors came out, they said, oh, welcome to the neighborhood. You should have seen the people that lived here before. Oh, they went through a crazy divorce, like fights in the streets and clothes and the thing and blah, 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 blah. That's called overt anger. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to resolve this power struggle, but the way we do it is we do it through our anger, our childhood state of our personality. But some of us aren't all overt, some of us are more a little covert, right? So does he have an allergy to anything? Does he not like cilantro or something? So she said, you know what, I've made the most wonderful dinner. Let's say you hate cilantro, and we put cilantro on everything. And this is called covert anger. And what we're trying to do is passively aggressively punish the significant other for not resolving my childhood traumas. It's fucked up, right? This is what we're trying to seek in our relationships and partnerships. And I promise you this, if we're not talking about marriage, we're talking about your partnerships. If we're not talking about your partnership, we're talking about your team members. Okay, you can't stay there forever. There's 2 more stages. The next stage is something called bargaining. And this is the beginning of the end. And we know the stats for relationships, 70% end up in divorce. Partnerships also, I think, is at that stat. Partnerships dissolving. Another 25%, maybe 30, live what is called a parallel life, right? Where we're getting our needs met outside of the relationship, right? In different ways. And then the third is something called despair, which is a devastating stage. And then you've met these people, right? You never want to go out with them again. But there's good news to all of this, by the way. There's another stage with something called the conscious relationship. And a conscious relationship says that as a relationship starts to mature and we start to navigate the power struggle, we navigate the power struggle through a set of skills. First, the listening skills. And the first thing we got to do in our partnerships and our relationships is start to now look or literally picture this individual as what we call a wounded child. So as we're in that conflict, as we're in that sort of issue, it's the wounded child that's fighting. And there's a number of different principles to it, but the most important thing that we can do in that moment is also start to change what we call our frustrations, concerns, and disappointments into requests. One of the most powerful things we can do in communication is ask. And if we do that listening thing, and we do that asking thing, and of course a conscious relationship is built on emotional intelligence and effective communication and a number of other things, but here's what it says. It says when we reach that conscious relationship, we navigate the world of the power struggle way easier, and we recreate that romantic love.